Loki Season 2 Episode 5 has blown the minds of almost every single Marvel fan. This is the content we've all been waiting for so long, and in this video I'm going to break down this episode and also tell you why this episode solidifies Loki as a top 5 MCU character. There's so much to get into. If you guys could hit that subscribe button and join us on the road to 1,000 subs, it would mean the absolute world to me. I read all of your comments and I most likely will respond, so let me know what you thought about this episode. With that out of the way, let's get right into this. This episode opens up with Loki again time slipping. He's back in the TVA, but back before the temporal loom blew up. He's wondering what's going on. He's slipping in and out of time in different times and places throughout the MCU and actually just the branch timelines in general. We see him watch himself in different versions in different places in time, such as the past of the TVA in episodes that we'd already seen, but we also see Loki visit different timelines, branch timelines, with our characters living on their branched lives. And this episode is all about Loki being alone and having to round up the troops. The TVA is now completely gone and it's all up to Loki to do something, anything, to fix, well, everything. He grabs one of the TVA journals written by Ouroboros, and then he sees that this time branch is actually deteriorating. When a time branch deteriorates, it turns into spaghetti, and this isn't the last time we see it in this episode, trust me. I could feel the nerves, I can feel the anticipation and anxiety building up throughout this episode because it seems like all hope is lost. Without the TVA, all of these time branches are going to prune themselves out and cease to exist. All of these people are going to die, and endless versions of Kang are going to conquer. After the opening title, we go to Alcatraz prison, where we find out that Casey, yes, Casey was one of the 3 prisoners who actually got to escape Alcatraz, and this did happen in real life. Loki time slips to Alcatraz and asks him to join him, but he doesn't know who he is because remember, this is Casey on his branch life timeline. Loki time slips again to a jet ski sales shop where he meets Mobius, the real version of Mobius. We also see B-15 working in New York as a nurse or a doctor helping people out. It's so interesting seeing the lives that these people live outside of the TVA because we know them as a certain character, but they're able to portray a completely different person due to their branch time. It was so cool seeing Mobius finally get to, well, fake ride a jet ski and be a jet ski salesman. We now know where this comes from, and we now know why B-15 always wants to help people. Remnants of these characters live in their TVA versions of themselves. Lastly, Loki meets up with Ouroboros, and Ouroboros in this timeline is actually an author, which he is an author in the TVA as well, but here he writes science fiction. And one of my favorite moments from this episode is a quote OB says to Loki. He explains that science is the what and the how, and the fiction is the why. I think this is very poetic, and I think this is one of my favorite quotes from the series as a whole, and this episode alone does so much character work and is so slow-paced but fast-paced at the same time. It's really telling, and I feel like multiple watches of this episode will only do you better to understand what these characters are, what it really means in the grand scheme of things in terms of theme and sort of story. Loki is trying to convince all of these people that they are TVA agents. Obviously, they have no idea what that means, and it's a huge struggle for him to try and get these people to leave their lives for the greater good to secure a better future. We see OB's home in the real world resembles his TVA home completely, and we also get the idea that Loki keeps time slipping and he needs to control it. He's already sort of halfway there because he's controlling it in a sense where he's going to all of these different places where all of his friends are, but to get all of them back together and to save the TVA, he needs the time signatures of all of them, and they all need to be together so the temporal auras can match up so Loki can go back to a certain point and place in time. It's very confusing time travel stuff, but it's sort of simplified in the sense that, look, all of these people need to be together because they've been together before in a different timeline, in a different place, so their temporal auras all match up. So if Loki needs to get back to the TVA, he needs to have all of these people come together and be in one era because the time signature and the temporal aura will match. That's my basic understanding of it. So he tells OB he needs to make a temp pad, and OB doesn't know how to do this, but well, he does because Loki does have the journal that Ouroboros wrote in the TVA. He hands it to this version of OB and says, well, I did become a best-selling author. We're seeing these characters' stories sort of loop back around the Ouroboros loop. It's a very, very significant theme of this show. Then we get to one of the best parts of the episode. Loki goes to recruit Mobius from his home. Remember, Mobius was very hesitant about even looking at his version of himself on the timeline because he didn't want to know. now. And well, now we actually know why he probably didn't want to look, because he is the father of 2 boys. He's a single dad making his way in the world, and if Mobius saw this version of himself, maybe he would want to live on the timeline, and that was what he was so afraid of. Again, we get fantastic moments between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston here. Their performances in this entire series have been the big standout, and I really think the relationship, the friendship that they've built over season 1 and now season 2 really is a testament to how we've seen the characters develop from the earlier phases of Marvel to now. We get these characters in only 2 seasons, but now we know that they're best friends. Even when Loki himself is staring down at a man who doesn't know who he is, he tries to convince him and he gets him to work with him. It's that unspoken trust. And it was at this moment where I realized Loki is turning into a very powerful, very understanding, and very benevolent character. Loki originally was a villain. If you remember back in the old Thor days, in the old Avenger days, Loki was the first big villain. And now all of these years later, we're seeing him become a hero. So as Loki recruits all of the members from the TVA from their different branch timelines, you get a sense that Loki is doing the right thing and Loki is becoming himself more powerful. He's a leader in his own right, and it's just such a very satisfying and very, it makes me grin when I watch it. It makes me very happy and very satisfied seeing this character who is so troubled and isn't inherently evil. Remember, he's all about illusions. He gives off the illusion that he was big, bad, and powerful, but really he's a good person at heart. And now he gets to tell his story. Now he gets to write his own path. It looks like they've got everybody back together with Casey, OB, B-15, Ouroboros, and guess what? They're still missing Sylvie. So of course Loki goes to the branch timeline at the McDonald's where we saw Sylvie work in the previous episode. And well, she still remembers him. She remembers He Who Remains. She remembers all of that stuff, but I'm not sure if she remembers meeting Victor Timely and all of the things from the previous episodes. But all that matters here is Sylvie does remember Loki, but with that being said, Sylvie still wants to stay on her timeline. She doesn't want to help with anything having to do with the TVA. If you pay attention to the background, you can see some things, including Sylvie's cup, disappear into the background, and it's shredding into spaghetti because this universe itself is dying. This timeline is dying. They go out for a drink, and Sylvie asks Loki, why are you doing this? What is your purpose here? What's your motive? Loki being a trickster and Sylvie knowing that because, well, she's a Loki variant, she's very curious as to why he's doing this. And the truth spills out. Loki says he's doing it for this, for that, but Sylvie doesn't believe him, and she finally breaks him. He comes out and says he doesn't want to be alone, he just wants his friends. And this was sort of heartbreaking. Loki has been alone for a very long time in the sense that he doesn't have anyone he can trust, he doesn't have anyone he can work with. But now, for maybe one of the first times in his life, he's getting that change and he wants to hold on to that. His job is to make sure all of his friends are okay and he cares about them, and this is a completely new development for this version of Loki, because we saw Loki eventually turn good with Thor Ragnarok and sort of everything after that leading up to Infinity War, but Loki this version only got to watch that, and now he's experiencing it. Loki fails to convince Sylvie, so he returns to the TVA a loser. But in a record shop, while Sylvie's contemplating what just happened, everything starts to turn into spaghetti. The timeline, the universe that she is on, the one that she wanted to stay on and live as a normal person, has now started to disappear completely, and she makes it out in just the nick of time. She goes back to the TVA, admits she was wrong, and wants to help. Only it's too late. They waited too long. This timeline starts to shred into millions and millions of strands of spaghetti, for lack of a better term. They call it spaghetti, so it's spaghetti. And they were too late. One by one, all of our characters disappear into nothingness, a very similar scene to what happens in Avengers Infinity War, and they all disappear except for Loki. At the moment right before he disappears, he finally learns how to control his powers. And these powers now are time travel? He controls the time slipping, so now what? Loki can control time in the sense that he can just go back and forth in any timeline he wanted. This is huge, this is massive, and I love the scene. The intensity was fantastic. He goes back right before the moment all of them died and says that it's not about the what or the where, it's the who. Loki, the god of mischief, now possibly going to be controlling the TVA and all of time. Are you kidding me? Just take a step back real quick. Look at the character development of Loki. As you start to remember all of the things that has happened to this character and with this character, and now what is going to happen with this character, there is no argument to the fact that Loki is one of the most important characters in all of Marvel. And I'm talking about up there with Iron Man, Captain America, and the like. He's been there since pretty much day one, and now he's got this massive godlike power. I mean, he is a god, but now he's almost more than that. They go back to the TVA to fix everything, back to the time right before Victor Timely exploded into spaghetti, and the episode ends. What a setup. This is Loki Infinity War. I was so excited to see what was going to happen next, and man, they teased me with a cliffhanger that was just so annoying. But it's good because, well, I love the episode so much that I cannot wait for next week's. I wish we had like 10 more episodes, but you know, all good things do have to come to an end. I've loved this series so far, and while the numbers for viewership are certainly lower, probably due to sort of the strikes and everything else happening, I think that this is one of the best projects Marvel has put out in a good while. And I'm of the camp that doesn't think Marvel has sort of died. Yes, they've changed, and I do think they have things they need to work on. It's growing pains. But this show, man, this show has been fantastic, and I think that this was probably my favorite episode so far. It has turned Loki into one of my favorite characters in the Marvel Universe, and I am so excited to see where they take his character in the future. More importantly, I'm curious as to what you guys think about this episode and what this means for Loki's future and the future of all of the timelines, especially if Loki has the ability to transport between different timelines and going back and forward in time itself. Will he be able to visit the X-Men universe? I mean, the possibilities are endless. So thank you guys so much for watching. The trailer for Echo just dropped, and I'm going to be doing a reaction and breakdown video for that. So if you guys want to watch that, click that subscribe button and it'll be up before you know it. So until next time, I will see you all very soon.